Everyone, Anthony here again. Now, up till now, we've basically been smashing code into the script editor here, which is all well and fine. But at this stage, you're probably getting chunks of things that you want to reuse over and over again. Great. So I thought we'd start diving into functions, and I do a brief anatomy of them. So try hopefully show you how they work, and like it really isn't that complex. But let's get into it. So a function in Python starts with the keyword def for define. We have to give a function a name so we can refer to it. So I'll call it my function name, and then you have an open bracket, and then you start giving it what we call parameters. These are things that the function needs to work on, or it needs to use to decide what to do. So, you know, commonly we do things like this: node, other, values, and let's say we do I don't know, delete everything. And we can also provide default values for it. So let's default it to not deleting everything. You end with a semicolon, and that is the beginning of a function. Now the next thing here is basically do work. That is kind of it. I'm just going to put a placeholder statement here, pass. So that's kind of what a function is. It's a single line definition here, which tells it, what do you call it? Things the function needs to work, and then do stuff. That's a good parts of it. So let's just expand this a little bit more. So I'm going to keep the opening line. So you should be seeing things like this, where we have a triple quoted string, which is a comment. So let's do this one. We'd have a one-liner. This shows what it does. Now, one line is convention. We'll also have additional stuff. Oh, sorry about my typing. I can't talk and oh god. Extra to explain in detail for future use, since you're probably not going to recall. Which describes me a lot of the time. After this, we will have that do work stuff. So for example, we would say node knob, let's get the label, set value to be high. All right, and then potentially you would see a return statement here. So I'm just going to return the string hello. So this is a little bit fuller as an example. So we've still got the same opening line up here, still the same parameters, nothing's changed there. We have the same do work thing, but we've added commentary, and we've added a return function, a return statement. So this allows this function to go, for example, to do something, and this can be, did it work, did it not work, or this function here could be a calculation. It might calculate something based upon the node, and you might want the math result back, such as I don't know, how many knobs aren't set to default, or which knobs aren't set to default, or maybe the curve on a knob, that kind of thing. This is actually a fully functioning function definition here. If I select it all, control enter and execute it, you'll see it disappears up here. Let's clear it out. Now if you remember from a previous video, Nuke script editor has tab completion. So I've defined a function called my function name. Let's type M, hit tab, and there it is. So, oops. It's registered the function in the overall thing. So there's my function name. So tab completion is super handy. The other thing, if you go back early enough, I recall mentioning the help command. So if we run help on the function, press enter, you'll see this is what we actually typed in. So this is what this stuff here assists you with, and that's why it's actually really handy to have it in there, because you'll build these things in a rush around about 2 AM in the morning. You'll just go, all right, that was a brilliant idea, I'm going to store it. If you got rid of this, you may not remember exactly the detail, but you can put notes to future self to remind you of little bugs you may have left in there, or things that you shouldn't do. Now I realize this is all somewhat abstract, so what we're going to do now is celebrating the fact I actually have a GPU again, so I can see colors in non-compressed horror. We're going to actually build a function that does something that's likely to be fairly fairly useful, and it's set the tile color on a bunch of nodes. Now, you've been wondering why I've got the word magenta there. Just going to comment that out. I have the tile color for magenta here, and we're just going to set the blur node to it. Right. So, like, actually, let's not even bother. You know how to set tile colors. Actually, if you don't know how to set the tile color, on the node itself, this guy here, this knob, this tile color, it has a very strange thing. So I'm just going to set it to this beautiful kind of red and blue, kind of hot pink. I'm in that kind of mood today. So Nuke, selected node. So I'm using the tab key because I keep typing it badly. And then we're just going to get the tile color, and then the value. So you would probably expect it to be something like something that looks like an RGB string, and you get this weird number here. That is because this is stored as a RGB triplet. RGB triplet alphas set to, like, you can muck around with this, but it means nothing in this context. So it's just an RGB number, and that's stored in a particular fashion. So if you haven't seen it, I'll put links to who have we got? We've got I'll put a link to Ben McEwen's page and Erwin Leroy's page. They'll explain more detail on it, but trust me, it'll make sense when you read those. So here we have our setup. Now I'm just going to focus on the blur node, and we'll bring up our little rig here. I'll set it to default, so we can open the color picker, and we don't actually need to see any of that. So what we want to do is we would like a function to help us just set the tile color of any node, pretty much. So that's our brief. So let's start with that one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first start by naming my function. Def set tile. For those of you in the Commonwealth, I'm using color without the U because the tile color is also without the U. I've fought this one, but I've had to adapt. So what do we need to set the tile color? So the parameters are what the function needs to work on, and also what it needs to do the work. So in our case, we need the node, and we're just going to define it as we want someone to supply us red, green, blue, so RGB, and that's everything, right? So that's our function line here. We're also going to just know that in the slider here, it goes from value from 0 to 1. So that's also what we're expecting people to provide, not any other kind of random number. So let's actually let's add the comment. So what does this function do? This sets the tile color knob of the node with the RGB provided. All right, so that's, I mean, it's pretty boring, but you'll remember that. But notice we just made a definition that RGB was a value from 0 to 1. So let's do this. RGB values must be between 0 and 1. Right. First lesson of humans, and anyone you're working with, people will put in whatever the heck they want. So we've said must be between 0 and 1. So we're going to put some code to enforce it. And we're also going to put a usage note here. Values outside this range will be clipped to 0 and 1. All right. Oops. So that's our function here. We don't return anything, and that's basically it. So this is actually a really good place to start, because we now have everything we had in our heads on the screen right now. So we know what it's called. We've made sure we've run through everything we need. We need a node. We need red, green, and blue values. And we know what we're going to do. So as we run through this, it should be pretty straightforward. Now I'm going to move across to something I wrote earlier. Let me just grab it over here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. This probably doesn't make any sense to you, but I'll just quickly run through. It is a 32-bit RGBA number with 8 bits per channel. So like a Targa almost, pretty much. The red is the most significant byte bit, I think. I forget. So what I've done here is we're doing the same thing with all three of the RGB values. All I've done is I've said the red value is the minimum of what you gave me and 1. So if your number's bigger than 1, it's going to be 1. So it's clipping it to 1. And it's also the maximum between the value that you gave me and 0. So it's going to keep it within this range. We'll get to the multiply by 255 in a second. I've actually replicated this in this way and this way, so they're all equivalent. So in this case, red is a minimum of r and 1, maximum between itself and 0. Or you can say it's 1 if it's bigger than 1, else it is what it is. It's 0 if it's less than 0, else it is what it is, right? So that's the 2 ways of doing it here. And this just compacts it into one line. So it's the, if you look at here, minimum, this minimum here is this first line here. So exactly the same thing. And I've just said, it'll evaluate this first and go, it's the minimum between the value you gave me and 1. So it'll be between negative infinity and 1. And then it's the maximum between that and 0. So this is a very common pattern for this particular range between two minimum and maximum points, which is why I've included it. I've also put down alpha here, not because we're using it and you see that we don't supply alpha. I've just set it to 1. This will come in handy later. Right. This, I'm actually going to put in comment in voodoo magic. This is not voodoo magic. This is me. This is how I'm thinking in terms of bit shifting. But again, treat that as voodoo magic for now because it's not relevant to the example we're doing here. Right? So this represents our kind of our do work function. So I've done something. I've added comments and I've done the null node and I'm going to set the new color. So I'm going to run it all. All right. So the first thing is obviously I've got a function called set tile color. Help set, hit tab, set tile color. All right. So my help text is here. My name of my function's here, and I've got nice values for RGB. All right. So let's try run it. Let's get the blur node. We'll blur equals nuke to node blur 1. All right, so I've got the blur node. So we want to do, let's get a bit more screen space. We want to use the function which was set tile color. We want to provide it the blur node, and let's make it. Let's make it bright. 1 1 1. All right. Work. Nothing exciting there. Let's make it 1 1 10 because people will do this. Didn't explode on us because we made sure it wouldn't explode. Minus 1. Still doesn't explode, but it sets it hard to 0. So our function's working as expected. That's kind of like the guts of everything. Now, earlier on in this example here, we also had this default value. So you might actually have someone someone like me who's particularly lazy and just does this. Blur. Just set the tile color. We have forced it to always have to require someone to supply the red, green, and blue value. But we can use defaults in a function. So let's just redefine that one. So let's just say, if you don't tell me, I'm just going to make it magenta. So magenta is maximum red, no green, maximum blue. Or actually I'd almost call that hot pink. Anyway, so I've just amended the function specification here so that the node is still required. But if you don't give me a red value, I'm going to assume it's 1. If you don't give me a green value, I'm going to assume it's nothing. And if you don't give me a blue, I'm going to assume it's 1. So I'm also going to update the documentation. So RGB are all optional. If not supplied, assumes you want hot pink. R equals 1, G equals 0, B equals 1. Right. And I'm going to just simply redefine the function. Control Enter, and I'm just going to set the color blur. And it gives us our horrible hot pink magenta-y kind of thing. If I check the help on that guy, oops, help. All right, and we've got our help text updated. And you can actually see this is in a way a little bit overkill, but you don't necessarily expect someone to be able to understand what this means. It's always better to write it out for an artist or for a real human who isn't a developer. So that, in essence, is the core of functions. It's not super scary, hopefully, and hopefully you'll also be able to start figuring out how to utilize these a little bit more. And one thing I would point out is, actually, let's go a little bit further quickly. So this thing here, right? This is actually converting a RGB 0 to 1 number into Nuke's tile color. Sounds like a function we should use, actually. So let's extract this. All right, so this is, oh wow, I can barely see. All right, just gonna detab it. Okay, so this is the code I have here. What we actually want is a function much like this. Def, what we'll call it, RGB to nuke weird color. Right, so we're going to take an RGB triplet in there. In this case, notice that I'm not putting any default values because there is no point for this function to run with defaults. It's insane. Right, so we're going to go convert, and I'm also lazy, so I'm just going to take some of this, that one, because I'm going to have exactly the same comment. So convert RGB into a Nuke tile color number. All right. Okay, so all this stuff is exactly the same. Nothing's changed. The only difference is we're going to return that value. Return the new color. Right. So this function, if I go up here and RGB to Nuke weird color, so RGB to Nuke weird color. So if you remember magenta 101. It's going to give us this number, which happens to be the number I just stashed up here. So it's the same thing. So it's going to give you a working thing here. And we can now amend the other function to avoid code duplication. And we know that, where are we? Yeah, so here, this new color, we kind of don't need the voodoo magic. We'll delete that one. RGB. Done, and we get rid of everything here. So you can see this function now is still, this docstring is still 100% correct. It will clip those values between 0 and 1 because this function's doing it for us. It will supply default values for red, green, and blue. This function isn't doing it for us because it makes no real sense. And it'll still set the node style color. So let us do that. So this function definition now calls the RGB to Nuke weird color, RGB to Nuke weird color, takes those three values and does it. And let's, what do we have? Set tile color on the blur node to, let's do something else just to illustrate. Let's do no red, some blue, and I don't know, some green and some blue. All right, cool. Good, and it's done. Now, the observant amongst you will have just gone, wait, you've put in 0.5 here, and yet it's 0.498. If you close that guy up here. 0.498, all right, so that hasn't changed. It's not a display bug. What happens if I actually put 0.5 in here? It's 0.498. That 255 thing here that I mentioned, I touch on a bit later. What we're doing is we're converting the number from 0 to 1 into the range 0 to 255. 255 divided by 2 exactly half is not quite 0.5. It's 0.498. There is no way to represent an integer that's exactly halfway in, like exactly like this. So yeah, you can actually replicate that by just typing in 0.5s here. So 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. Woo, geez. I don't know what I just did there. 0.5, 0.5. And if you close this one and reopen it, what it's doing is these values here are being updated from the actual values it's got stored. When I typed them in, it was just keeping on the display. So yeah, this is probably one of our more dense ones, but it is, functions are super useful. It is almost the fundamental building block for a lot of this stuff. When I learned how to code initially, it started with functions, and then you get into object-oriented programming, but like functions are not scary, but building them this way, especially if you start with that pattern where we literally started with, what do I want to call it? What do I want to feed it? What the heck is it meant to do? If you get that pattern down pat, if you're used to that and you work and you think this way, you're going to find a lot of stuff just becomes really simple, because if you can't explain to yourself what you're trying to do, you either don't have a solution to the problem, or you don't have something that actually belongs in a function. You can definitely shoehorn it in a function. That's totally done. Like, I've done that a lot of times. But having this kind of approach means you think a little bit and just go, yeah, maybe I need to break down the problem a bit more. Or you just look at yourself in the mirror and go, oh, why am I doing that? Because it wouldn't be the first time I've actually written down documentation and I've actually contradicted myself, and I've just realized that I'm just about to spend 2 hours building something that can't possibly work. Which is good to actually know before you start doing it. Anyway, as usual, chuck any questions or notes in the comments. Because we've got a lot of this code here, I'll put it in a comment or inside the, I don't know how many characters I've got stuck in YouTube, so you can copy paste it. I do strongly recommend, however, if you don't copy paste it, actually type it out again. A lot of times it's just the muscle memory you get from hitting the keyboard several times that helps you retain a lot of this stuff. So yeah, all right, I'll see you guys later.